For every famous hatch, legendary river, or renowned migration, there are countless others that go virtually unrecognized. Feeling the need to try something new, we set out to fish and film locations that, for us, were outside the norm. 2 years later, we're proud to present a snapshot from our travels. We give you Off the Grid. When you hear the term fly fishing destination, Cleveland, Ohio may not be the first place you think of, but that's exactly why we chose it as the starting point for our journey. Brett McCrae and Jim Lamprose are living the early 20s fly junkie dream. They live just minutes from their favorite water, they're both employed in the fly fishing industry, and they have a killer bachelor pad, ideally located directly above an Irish pub. For most 20-year-olds, the days are long and the nights are longer. But for these two, no matter how long the party lasts, the daylight hours are devoted to just one thing. Cleveland-based fishing guide, Brett McCrae.
I'm 21 years old. I grew up in Northeast Ohio, fishing a lot of the rivers we have around here for steelhead. I first started with really no idea what I was doing, no idea how to fish or how to, God forbid, to catch one of these things. And over the past 8-10 years, I've gotten hooked, and now here I am, a while later, guiding this fishery. So it's been really interesting to go full circle on this, from somebody who knew absolutely nothing, sort of beginning to get to know something about this fishery and seeing that transition happen.
Grew up on the east side of Cleveland, and like a lot of people, fished since I was a really little kid, and it wasn't all that long ago actually that I started fly fishing and started doing it on this fishery and these rivers, and got the bug. It's days like this where you're out in a snowstorm and maybe you hook a couple fish, maybe you don't, but those are the kind of things that drive you to stick with the sport.
I think our streams get a bad rap sometimes for being crowded, but I don't think a lot of people realize is that there's just as many days like this where there's nobody out on the water as there are on days where other folks are out here enjoying it as well. But days like today are definitely special.
Yeah, it's kind of a how bad do you want it thing, and it's the guys you see out on days like this that are usually the ones who are passionate about the sport and about the fishery, and these are their favorite days. These are our favorite days.
These fish, they really range in what they look like. These chrome fish are just two colors. They're either navy blue down their back and silver everywhere else, or they're, sometimes they've got a dark olive back and again, silver everywhere else. And then as they're in the river longer, they take on more of the colors you'd associate with a stream resident rainbow trout. And the hens, especially, towards the wintertime, they keep that silver coloration towards their bellies, but they get a nice pink stripe down their side, and sometimes that stripe will even turn purple and kind of melt into a bronze back, which is just absolutely gorgeous.
Since the introduction of these fish into the Great Lakes, anglers have fiercely debated whether these are deserving of the name steelhead, or if they're just a large lake-run rainbow trout. But whatever you want to call them, they're big, strong, and fortunately for the anglers in this region, very plentiful.
I'm a fishing manager for the Orvis Company store in Cleveland. There's days where, you wish you were on the water, and at the same time, one of the things I get to do on a day-to-day basis is tell people about this fishery and how cool it is and how easy it is to access. And when you see other people that start from scratch like I did not that long ago and get the bug like I got, that's rewarding. And those people want to stick with the sport, and they become stewards of the river and of the fishery, and that's what we need. So I can kind of, in some ways, take pride in my position, even though it means I'm not always on the water. And having a roommate that's a guide for me is fun, just because I get to hear fish stories and get to hear what the fishing was like on a given day. And sometimes it hurts, but a lot of times it just gets you excited for the next opportunity to get out there.
Jim and I met when we were both working at a fly shop that was actually right on the banks of a local steelhead river. We were both in high school, and we were both kind of really starting to get excited about this fishery and getting serious about it. And it was perfect because we were both learning new water a lot. We were both learning new techniques. We were both learning different stretches of different rivers and everything else. And really, I think that because we were both in a similar position there, that's the reason why we became close buddies and close friends. This is what we do for fun. It's the reason why we're such good friends, and it'll probably be that way for a long time.
We're pretty young guys, Brett being 21 and myself 23, and having met when we were even younger than that. These days, there aren't a whole lot of people our age that come from the backgrounds that we come from, mainly suburban, that enjoy being outside in weather like this, or doing things outdoors, whether it's backpacking or rafting or fly fishing. And so finding, becoming buddies at a young age where I think we both recognized in each other that this was something we were passionate about, has kept us close. And a lot of the guys that we hang out with and become friends with in the sport over the years are significantly older than us, but they share that passion, and that's something that brings people together, I think, in the fly fishing community. So anytime you recognize that in somebody else, you're probably destined to have some things in common with them.
There are few types of fly fishing as steeped in tradition and anglers as passionate and opinionated as steelheaders. While the Great Lakes fish, Ornyorhynchus micus, is for the most part genetically identical to West Coast steelhead, the majority of Western steelhead diehards claim that if a fish doesn't touch the salt, it's not really a steelhead. So we figured the best way to compare the two would be to put the experiences side by side. So we decided to take a trip to one of the best steelhead fisheries in the world, British Columbia, Canada. To capture the true BC experience, I called upon two very close Canadian friends, Kevin Estrada and Todd Scharf, and asked if I could join in on an early season steelhead trip. They both agreed, but under the condition that I first stop in the Lower Mainland to fish the Fraser River with Kevin Estrada.
Born and raised in British Columbia, Canada. I started playing hockey about the age of 3, and now I'm playing over in Europe. I spent time in the States for 6 years on a scholarship to Michigan State, signed with the Carolina Hurricanes in the NHL, and played 3 years in the American Hockey League. While I was in the American Hockey League, I decided to take on another passion of mine, which is fishing. And I own and operate a guided fishing company throughout British Columbia. And I play hockey.
The Fraser is the longest river in BC, and it's the 10th longest river in Canada. Its immense flows and raw power are daunting, especially when taking it head on at full speed.
There's nothing like that pull that you get from a sturgeon. I mean, people that haven't experienced it, they're bottom feeding fish, but they jump multiple times through through a fight, and sometimes can last up to hours. So until you've actually experienced it, it's not like a halibut. I guess the closest thing from what I've heard is it's Canada's version of the tarpon. And so for us, it's a pretty crazy experience, pretty exceptional quality of fishing that we have here in British Columbia.
Kevin's pursuit and overwhelming love for the sturgeon has morphed into borderline obsession, taking the time to measure and tag as many fish as he can in a given season. While sturgeon are occasionally caught on fly, accomplishing it with any frequency seems logistically challenging. But hooking one of these giants on fly would be nothing short of epic. I first met Todd Scharf while fishing the lower mainland around Vancouver. When it comes to spey casting, I'm definitely out of my element and not privy to judge, but as a cameraman that's filmed quite a few spey anglers over the years, Todd's one of the best spey casters and anglers I've ever seen.
You know, up in British Columbia, we really like to swing flies for anadromous fish. And the reason being is you're sort of targeting the aggressive fish. The fish that are on the take, and it gives you this, adrenaline. You're sort of looking up, watching the eagles fly by, and you sort of get in this ADD mode of just chucking it, swinging it, taking a step. You're definitely paying attention, and you're sort of a bit on point. When you feel that water, that right speed, you're fishing to the bucket. The water's starting to slow a bit, and in your fly, just you can sort of hair starts standing up in the back of your neck. You're starting to feel this. Right, and once you start to feel that swing, you sort of know that okay, it's all going to happen here. And as you're watching your fly hit the water and start to swing, and you throw your first little mend in there, and you're just watching your line straighten out and start to swing downriver. All of a sudden you get this this either tap or just an explosion, and then this stuff goes off. It's just like you're hooked up to 220 volts. You stick your hand into the light socket type thing, and fish are running and jumping, and you're on fire. And I think that's why swinging flies, in my opinion, is my favorite thing to do. You can't really duplicate it. It's a bit of a feely thing. You can't see it. You just got to have a little bit of a touch to it, right? And I see a lot of guys when they start to swing flies, lift up on that rod, and I always say lift them, lose them. When you feel that tug, you just really don't do anything except for just let it get tight, and the fish will pretty much hang himself on it. So, I think swinging flies to me is one of the most rewarding, that and skate and dries, way of catching anadromous fish. And, skate and dries is a little different. If we can do it every day, I'd skate dries, but, conditions have to be right, water visibility, water temperature, and the fish that are willing to take that surface pattern. But say 9 times out of 10, we're mostly swinging flies on sink tips, and that's sort of the gig for fishing anadromous fish in colder waters here in British Columbia.
To kick off the ultimate BC steelhead trip, we discussed heading north on a chopper, maybe picking up Todd and touching down on some of the most remote rivers on the continent. Or there was always the float plane route. Find a suitable landing on an unknown lake and assemble a multi-day descent through uncharted steelhead territory. Either option would provide for the quickest route off the grid. But there was just one rather substantial limiting factor: cash flow. So instead, we piled as much gear as we could fit into Kevin's giant truck and began the 14-hour drive north.
Okay, this is what we got. They've been calling for rain for 3 weeks in Terrace, and it's finally starting to rain there, and now it's supposed to rain for the next 4 days in Terrace. So we're about 3.5 hours into the drive. We got another 10 hours solid or more left, and there's definitely some world-class filming to be done up there. We got boat in there. The best fishing place in the world. Oh, look at this beauty.
What's that?
It's a hockey card from 2007. When I was under contract with Carolina Hurricanes, and that's a team, their top affiliate in the American Hockey League that I played for, the Albany River Rats. Left wing Kevin Estrada. Most people wonder when they see me why I'm not Mexican or Spanish because of my last name, but Spanish descent, I guess. And I don't look like Eric Estrada from Chips, even though all my teachers used to call me Eric. We've driven a little bit further, and we've been stopped like 3 times by construction. We're just sitting, it feels like we're going nowhere. And we got like 11 hours left in our drive still. And the rivers are blown out. We just talked to Todd. Chocolate milk. But I guess that's what you do, is you don't know, and you just keep on keeping on. So, we just saw a dandy little flag girl back there, and that's part of the whole experience, is going through and the process, right? You don't really worry about outcomes in life. I think you worry about the process. Enjoy the process, and the outcomes will play out themselves. You can't control that.
And that's process for all the Americans.
It's process.
That's how we...
Not process. It's
we don't know it.
roof, not rough. And it's tomato, not tomato. Long day. 11:30. Finally arriving in Terrace. Like to have some sleep. On the road for about 14.5 hours, I think, total. We made actually some pretty good time. Gas stops and construction work and bobcats chasing deer. We've had a lot of excitement today, and we're almost there.
After filming the steelhead in the native rivers that they've been running for centuries and witnessing the natural beauty of BC, my attempt to compare the experiences and the fish themselves felt somewhat foolish. Maybe the fish in the Great Lakes are deserving of the name steelhead, and maybe not. But what struck me as more important was the obvious dedication and sense of passion each group of anglers express for their fish and their fisheries. If you're really looking to get away from crowded rivers and civilization in general, why not head to one of the least populated states in the Union? Now, while certain parts of Wyoming, mainly the parks and towns like Jackson, do experience decent amounts of tourist traffic, other parts of the state are about as remote as it gets. There's a big nail sticking on the tire. So we decided on a super remote portion of the state and to visit one of my favorite fly shops in the country. There's just something magical about a good fly shop's ability to consume time. And it's rather common for a quick stop to turn into a multi-hour affair. That being said, there are few fly shops I'd rather be in than a remote little rustic fly shop owned and operated by Clark Smythe. Now, it's called a fly shop, but it's actually a bit of a hybrid. Quasi-bar, hunting, fishing museum, with a sufficient man cave attic, suitable for playing cards and other types of mischievous behavior.
He's under it. Oh, there he is.
The young guide staff includes Guide Brett McRae, the steelhead guide from Ohio, as well as a cast of characters that return to the area each summer to guide on the various trout streams in the area. While the usual guest accommodations are top-notch, we are obliged to crash in the guide quarters. Welcome to Poolside. We're not exactly sure how many seasons Poolside has been in operation, or the last time it was thoroughly cleaned for that matter, but it has character, a strongly smelling character. And if you're wondering why they call it Poolside, well, because it's the only trailer in the area with its own pool. It's somewhat obvious that there's a direct correlation between fishing quality and your distance from a populated area, and the opposite is apparently true for nightlife. So if you're guiding in the middle of nowhere, it turns out you have to get pretty creative to entertain yourself. Enter the rare Wyoming wine box tree. And perhaps the biggest challenge is managing that creativity. There's something truly unique and inspiring about the open, western landscape, an iconic representation of what the Old West once was. On occasion, the various brown, tan, and red colors that dominate this harsh and arid country are interrupted by the flow of cold, pure water that give way to a lush oasis that twist and snake through the desert like giant green serpents. Many of these tiny creeks and rivers are teeming with insect life and produce truly wild trout fishing. Now, over the years, we've interviewed quite a few anglers, but Clark Smythe takes the award for biggest smart.
I'm Carlos Mendoza from Pinedale. I don't know what I want to say. I don't want to talk about we. Do I talk about me? Do I look in the camera?
What's your favorite way to fish this place?
Upstream.
How'd you do today? Did you do pretty well out there?
You were there. Oh God. We're in the middle of nowhere, somewhere north central Wyoming. In a small cow pasture creek, meandering through these here cow pastures. Middle of nowhere, Wyoming. Yeah. All kidding aside, Clark Smythe. I grew up in the mountains of Colorado, and then been coming out here taking people fishing for the last 10 years. This is 100% wild fish. They act wild. If you're not bringing your A game, they're gonna get the best of you. It's the real deal. Favorite way to fish this? Obviously with a dry fly. They eat grasshoppers here. They eat stoneflies here. Big dries. That's the way to go. But not every day they're eating that way. So they don't eat a fly that's not drifting right or looking good. But that's normal. That's anywhere. Amazing amount of variety. You can find places where it opens up and anyone can catch fish, and then there's tricky lies that are high risk, high reward kind of place, and sometimes well worth the risk. Lose a lot of flies that way. It fishes great and it fishes like it's fishing. What do you want?
One of our principal motivations behind the trip to Wyoming was to hit a predicted epic hopper hatch. But we were surprised to learn that a number of counties had taken the offensive in order to protect crops. The epic hopper hatch, predicted to be one of the largest of our lifetime, was non-existent. The fields were quiet and barren. Bad news for anything depending on grasshoppers. Extremely disheartened and still eager to get our hopper fix, we headed west.
Welcome to Montana.
Twin Bridges is a classic little Montana town, and to the average person, it's about off the beaten path as it gets, but not for fly anglers. Every year, swarms of anglers descend on this region, ideally located in close proximity to some of the most well-known fishing rivers, not just in Montana, but in the trout fishing world. But we made a stop to visit one of the biggest characters we've ever met, a fellow by the name of Rooster.
We're going to place a rattlesnake in a feller's boat. This may not pan out the way I want it to. I'm pretty sure he can whip my ass and he's going to do it.
No shit.
He's a pretty nice one. He's about, I don't know, 30 inches long.
And for a little of this. While the most notable hatch in the area is usually considered the salmon fly, the appearance of hoppers draw anglers from around the world. But we decided to stay off the more well-known rivers and to explore a few lesser-known and nearly impossible to access spring creeks. Nearly 70 years earlier, and some 300 miles to the south, Ernest Hemingway was finishing For Whom the Bell Tolls, and fishing what is now the well-known Silver Creek, located just outside of Ketchum, Idaho. Hemingway and his son Jack fell in love with the area, in part because of the outstanding fishing, and it's been on the fly fishing map ever since. The area is also home to a longtime fishing buddy, gifted writer and guide John Huber. Huber's fortunate to live and guide in some of the most picturesque and rewarding trout waters in the world, but his waters are by no means off the beaten path. So again, you're probably wondering why we'd stop at an iconic place during prime time on the river. Well, to tag along on yet another adventure. For the trout guide looking for some tropical saltwater action, one option is the hosted trip. By some degree of luck, we were invited to tag along. The island of Punta Pájaros is ideally located between famed Ascension Bay and Espiritu Santos, off the east coast of the Yucatan Peninsula, in Quintana Roo, Mexico. And the area is teeming with bonefish, permit, tarpon, snook, and countless other saltwater species.
Here in the island of Punta Pájaros, we're lucky to be part of history. We're at the Chuckmall ruins. They date back easily to the late 1300s, post-classic period. This was a trading post. It hasn't changed much. The staff here at Playa Blanca, Casablanca on the island, half the staff have Mayan blood, Mayan history. Their first language in life was Mayan because they're from the Yucatan Peninsula. Fishing in the blood. I mean, everybody here, we all fish. I mean, it's just a way of life. Normally, for a very long time, the Mayans, hardly ever any women here. But I think this week it's been an especially different week. I think just about every client this week is a lady, is a woman. And I think we have a couple of guys here, but I think this week is a very special week because they have mostly ladies.
While the fly fishing world is still largely male-dominated, more and more women are picking up fly rods and showing the fly fishing world that they're just as fishy as the guys.
I started fishing as a little girl with my dad. I picked up my first fly rod in 1993 and turned my love of fly fishing into a career when I started my fly fishing and adventure travel company, Exclusive Expeditions, in 2003. And I get to show people how to do a sport that I love so much. I've spent most of my time fly fishing in South America and freshwater. And this is my real first warm water salt fishing trip. Fishing for bonefish and permit and tarpon. As a trout angler, I was really excited about this trip, and this was a perfect opportunity to come down and actually fish with a bunch of women from beginner to super expert and hang out and learn how to do this. One of the reasons why I love fly fishing so much, and I think that probably, although I can't speak for the fly fishing world, I think there'd be a pretty large consensus of people saying I love it because there's always something new to learn. There's a new fly to use, there's a new species to catch, there's a new piece of water to read, there's a new piece of equipment to try. And you know what? For this trip, I bought some new rods. And I got to use some of my reels that I don't get to use very often. So, and I have new flies in my collection and new friends.
Oftentimes considered the most prized saltwater flats fish, the sheer numbers of permit in these waters is staggering. But despite the abundance of fish, permit fishing looks tough. That's because it is. On some days, everything can be in your favor. Mild winds, good sun, and plenty of shots. But still, the fish just don't eat. And herein lies part of the attraction. For many anglers, it seems the challenge is the most important aspect of the overall pursuit, allowing less challenging species to sometimes fall out of favor. Such can be the case with whitefish, Arctic grayling, pike, or any number of species that too readily take a fly. To look into this phenomenon, we spent some time with redfish, a species that sometimes, and unjustly in our opinion, tend to fall in favor when they're too easy to catch. We traveled to what is considered one of the most challenging red fishing areas on the planet.
I'm Captain Scott McCalla. I'm a 5th generation native Floridian. I'm from Titusville, which is on the shores of the Indian River Lagoon. I've been fishing out here all my life, my 10th year professionally guiding. Spent many days out here with my dad, and just a lot of time on my own too, exploring and stepping on stingrays and stubbing my toes in the mud.
You're better at this than I am. he was a debater in what, college or high school?
Both.
Yeah, you're better public speaker. I'm not. It's not my job to speak.
Just talking.
I'm Captain Nick Sasek. I was born and raised in Central Florida. Well, the primary fish is going to be redfish and sea trout, but redfish I think is what bring people here.
It's the most ecologically diverse estuary in the world. We have the longest stretch of undeveloped natural coastline on the whole eastern seaboard of the United States. And we're lucky to have it. We're lucky that it's not developed. We're lucky that the National Park Service and the Department of the Interior, they take such good care of the area.
It's a body of water that's mainly non-tidal. It's the only place in the world that we have groups of redfish that actually reproduce within the lagoon system. Most of the time, redfish move out into passes or inlets to spawn, but we have our own spawning groups or breeding groups that live in here in the Indian River. The fish, they grow up here, so they get real smart real quick. So it definitely makes it a tough fishery, but it's a great fishery. There's a ton of redfish here. It's just like going to Islamorada. It's probably one of the most challenging areas to catch a redfish, and like I tell clients, if you can catch one here, you can catch one anywhere. So you definitely need to have an A game when you show up. But guiding on the Mosquito Lagoon is challenging, but yet very rewarding.
You know, the evenings in the winter can get just unreal. You know, in the wintertime, we won't start fishing till 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, and fish till dark if it's cold, because the fish will, you know, they get more active as the day goes on, as it warms up. And, you know, if you get the right conditions where you have light winds in the evenings, it can be stellar. You know, if it slicks out and if it's overcast and it's, you know, it's been cool and it's just starting to warm up, they can go bonkers. Then they'll put their feed bags on. But you know, Nick and I spend a lot of time trying to figure things out. We do it because we love it, not because we have to do it or we need to do it. We do it because we love to do it, and that's important.
Catching a redfish on the fly in the Mosquito Lagoon, or the surrounding area for that matter, can be flat out tough. For that reason, makes every boated fish that much sweeter. But to complete the comparison, we headed a bit northwest, to a marsh with significantly less pressure. It's really tough to imagine losing interest in big redfish crashing topwater. But perhaps if you did it day in and day out, it could possibly get old. But somehow I highly doubt it. What's really unique about fly fishing is that it's rewarding to each individual angler for a very unique and personal set of reasons. Some are driven sheerly by numbers or size or records, while others are in the pursuit of the ultimate experience. The motivations are limitless and unbound. My interest in fly fishing will continue to evolve for the rest of my life. It'll always be the thread that binds my existence. But at this stage in the game, I'm most intrigued by a challenge.
It's the no permit blues.
In December, we were invited back to the island of Punta Pájaros to fish for permit with Jorge and then lodge manager Eric Carvalho. Reaching the island when the weather's perfect is as simple as a short Cessna flight from Cancun to the private landing strip. But when there's a hurricane involved, it takes a little bit more effort.
What's our plan? We're gonna fly around those clouds?
You need to go to Mexico City.
Now the lodge usually closes during this period, and it's not uncommon for the weather to be brutal. But sometimes you just have to roll the dice. So we did, and we lost. There's a temple on the island that's dedicated to the Mayan god of weather.
The Mayans would give offerings. It would be a great offering, something good for the population if you were to give your firstborn virgin daughter up to the Chukmal gods. The Chukmal god, basically like the god of weather. And we're in an area where weather's real important. For hundreds of years, actually people dropped across this rock with obsidian knives and tools. High priest take the heart out, walk over while it's still beating, and deliver it into the Chukmal's chest.
Being witness to a week of savage weather on the island, it all starts to make sense. And while I've only dabbled in mountaineering, sitting around waiting for the storm to break in one of the best fishing grounds in the world, watching our window of opportunity slowly vanish, made me feel like a climber trapped in a tent with fleeting hopes for reaching the summit. On the fourth day of waiting, I snuck out with guide Jorge to try and find a few bonefish in a small sheltered bay. When Jorge first arrived on the island as a teenager, it was to work in the gardens. He was from a small town in the interior. Not only was he not a fisherman, but he'd never seen a fly rod. Watching the guides depart each morning and hearing the stories each night upon their return, he saw an opportunity. So he purchased English books, studied hard, and dedicated all of his free time to learning about boats and water and fish. Fast forward roughly 7 years, and Jorge is not only one of the best guides on the island, but an incredible saltwater angler. And perhaps it's the guide talking in him, but he claims that as soon as this weather breaks and the sun's rays warm the flats, fishing is gonna go off. When the weather eventually broke, it left us one day to hit the flats. Now, I'm not an overly superstitious angler, but it's hard to feel lucky when you've run out of luck. But Mexican determination, it turns out, is a powerful and resourceful force to be reckoned with.
Come across some snook, and we had a great time throwing poppers at them, but you cannot beat snook blowing up a popper. Snook, they get you back into the mangroves, and pretty much it's all over. They're going to wrap you around a mangrove and break you off, or rip the fly loose. But it was a battle. We were able to keep the snook out of the mangroves today, which was nice. About took a couple fingers with it, but he didn't make it to the mangroves. We brought him to hand. That is one of the biggest snook I've caught. It was a beautiful snook. It was definitely one to remember.
So you've just landed the largest snook of your life. You're still shaking from the rush as it swims out of your hands. You look at those around you, and there's only one question. What's next?
Easy, man, not yet. Okay, the fish is coming, you see him?